Former President Trump has called for high tariffs on China, 60% or more. But why would this be necessary for U.S. national security? And at what cost would this come? I spoke to Antonio Graceffo, a China economic analyst and the author of Red Alert, China's Global Power and How It Threatens U.S. National Security. Good morning, Antonio. Good to see you. So first of all, let's talk about some context. How is China benefiting from normal trade relations with the U.S. and why is this dangerous to Americans?
The problem with the normalized trade relations with China is that China has lots of restrictions on U.S. trade. They restrict us from or prohibit us from investing in certain sectors in China, quite a long list of sectors. They charge higher tariffs on our products and we charge on theirs. And because we've normalized, we're supposed to treat them the same as we treat other countries, which means lower tariffs and almost no restrictions.
So a lot of talk is about national security. Why is that a threat to national security?
There's several reasons why. Number one is that China is in our supply chains. And of course, China is the country that we are most likely to go to war with. And I say that even as a possible war with Iran is looming, but Iran is not a near peer. China is. So going to war with China is very serious. And if China is in our supply chains, well, they will just stop selling us stuff. And then we wind up having shortages, and a lot of the things that we import from China are related to defense, ironically. So we're dependent on China both for our consumer products and then also for some of our defense products and so forth. So we need to move China out of our supply chains.
So how could tariffs contribute to fixing this issue? Is that a good approach? Tariffs, I mean.
Yes. Yes, tariffs are a very good approach. They can definitely help do this. So what happens when we have a tariff, it means that our president will place a tariff. It's basically a tax on the importation of Chinese goods. That is a tax that will be paid by the American people. So you'll read in the liberal media when they criticize Trump, they're like, oh, it turns out that actually the American people are going to pay the price. Well, yes, that's what a tariff is. A tariff is supposed to make the product more expensive. However, that tariff revenue goes to the government. This is a tax. The government uses it to operate the government, and it can reduce, for example, the need for increases in income tax because the government now has another source of revenue. That tariff money, the tariff tax, goes to the U.S. government rather than the CCP. So that's another benefit, is that it's benefiting our government, not a foreign government. The way this helps us decouple from China is that now the Chinese product will be more expensive than the American product, and so people will buy the American product. The more American products we buy, then the more our manufacturing sector can expand and they can start making more products. And we can also start making them more efficiently and cheaper because we'll have greater economies of scale.
So let's talk about Trump's tariff proposals, especially because he was talking about 60% or more. And you just mentioned one point of criticism that, it would make things more expensive. Let me give you another example, because some have said that Trump's, his first term tariffs, that is, it made the dollar more expensive and U.S. products became not just expensive for Americans, but it became less, less competitive globally. And then that was instead of closing that trade deficit. It didn't really work out. So what do you say about the bigger picture here?
Well, what's ironic is that the Democrats criticized the Trump tariffs during his first administration. They then kept all the tariffs and increased them, right? So any criticism that they had was just absolutely because they hate Trump. It had nothing to do with economic realities or economic calculations that they did, because they kept those tariffs and they increased them. The reason why Trump is proposing a 60% tariff is because if we increase the price of Chinese goods by 3% or 4%, people will continue to buy them. If we increase them by 60%, nobody's going to buy them. And the other thing is that if we were to say to China, we are now halting all Chinese imports into the United States, China would consider that a major escalation in our negative relations. But instead, we will say, China, we will continue to import your products, but they're going to have this humongous tariff on them, and it's up to the American people if they want to buy them or not. So diplomatically, it's a little bit better than actually cutting ties with China. As for the dollar's been strong for the last 8 years. Actually, under both administrations, the dollar has continued to increase in value, which for many things is a good thing. I think what you're referring to there, though, is that it does make our exports more expensive. So as our exports become more expensive, then people can't afford to buy them because they have to pay dollars for our exports. And when the dollar is high, they can't afford them. But recently, I was in Malaysia. When I used to live in Malaysia, it was 3 ringgit to the dollar. Now it's 4 ringgit to the dollar. So everything I was buying was 25% cheaper than it was years ago when I lived in Malaysia. So the dollar, is very strong. But then that means for Malaysian people, when they want to buy an American product, they want to buy some Nike shoes or something like that, it's now 25% more expensive for them. So having a strong currency is a bit of a double-edged sword. That's not very much related to tariffs, so that it has to do with the general strength of the economy and the interest rates.
China's economy is in quite a bit of trouble right now. There is deflationary pressure. The central bank, government, or regime, they're trying really hard to revive it. But so what does all that mean if we put it into context with the tariffs and decoupling efforts? How would that affect China that is in the state?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Right now, the Chinese economy is in trouble, and Xi Jinping is doing a major stimulus, which is, of course, costing money to the government and driving up their debt. If we have these tariffs in place, it will decrease China's exports. It will decrease the income to the CCP at a time when the economy is already weak. So it's going to hurt them even more.
Well, thank you so much, Antonio Graceffo. I think that was some really clear analysis and insights. I appreciate it, like always.
Thank you very much.